Okay, it's drizzling a bit in various areas, not here yet, fortunately anyways. And what did I read today? Lots of little bits it seems like about things like drone regulation proposals and so forth. How about this first one? This one says, drone bill generates privacy discussion in House panel. Privacy concerns and even Summit carbon solutions and carbon pipelines entered the questions and discussions in a House committee about a Senate bill that covers drone use in South Dakota. Senate Bill 169 revises provisions on drone use in the state. SB 169 passed the Senate Transportation Committee 6-1 on February 7th and a full Senate 33-0 on February 12th. The House Transportation Committee passed SB 169 today on a 12-0 vote. Committee member Republican Rep. Brande Shopbar asked the bill's sponsor, Republican Senator David Johnson, if the state had any law regarding privacy in the airspace above private property. The state does not, Johnson said. He originally wanted his bill to include the 150 feet from private property as private airspace, but that would be in violation of Federal Aviation Administration regulations, Johnson said. The FAA controls the airspace, Johnson said. It's one of those topics usually too, where people say they own the airspace and so forth in the area, when in reality, with the way the laws and stuff work, it doesn't work that way. It says, it's too soon for that, Johnson said, of an attempt to specify certain feet as private airspace. As the FAA and others continue to discuss and consider drone use, Johnson believes there will be a time in the future when private airspace is a possibility. Would you think that's a good thing or a bad thing overall? In terms of, let's say you, as a property owner, for example, say, oh, this is my spot here, you can't fly anything above it within a certain range and so forth? Or would you think it's bad, for example? And then in other places, it sounds like they're trying to relax their drone laws and so forth in terms of making it more accessible in many ways. This one says, drones free to fly low around buildings in latest CAA proposal. Drones can soon be flying low around buildings and other infrastructure without the remote pilot being in visual contact, according to new proposal put forward today by the UK CAA. Inspections of railways, power lines, farms, and roads, plus emergency medical deliveries are among the use suggested in the proposal. Kevin Woosley, head of remotely piloted aircraft systems at the CAA, said, our proposals are a positive step towards unlocking the next stage for drone flying in the UK. It makes me think with that saying there, is it kind of like a regulator taking away people's, let's just say, ability to use something, and now they come up saying, oh look, we're going to give people the ability to do this now, hooray, we're doing our jobs. That's what it seems like in many ways. It says, allowing drones to fly beyond the sight of the remote pilot without placing restrictions on other aircraft in the area will be a major achievement for UK drone operations. Safety comes first in everything we do, and so we have identified sensible mitigations on where drones can fly using this proposed concept to make sure we maintain levels of safety. The CAA went on to describe an atypical air environment, saying, quote, an atypical air environment can be considered as a volume of airspace where you can reasonably anticipate there will be a reduced number of conventionally piloted aircraft due to the proximity of ground infrastructure. Operating within an atypical air environment does not address any aspect of ground risk that the operation may pose. It is likely that certain elements of ground risk are increased by operating close to infrastructure. It is for the operator to propose how they intend to mitigate other areas of risk, including seeking any relevant approval and ensuring coordination with the infrastructure owner as required. But enough of that thought. Usually when it comes to things like airspace and potentially avoiding other aircraft per se, being around like the buildings and stuff is the safest place to kind of do it if you think about it, because it would be ridiculous to assume, okay, there's going to be a manned aircraft flying, let's just say, within 5 meters of this building. So that gives you a lot of flexibility to say, okay, I'm safe at least there from these huge manned aircraft. If anything, I even mentioned before, I'm more worried about a bird, honestly, hitting a drone than an actual manned aircraft with the way I fly it personally. And as I was walking now, you guys notified me about this story, which is kind of interesting, where apparently, I guess there's a proposal to literally ban things like Chinese drones and all that. It says, Stefanik's countering CCP Drones Act receives legislative hearing. Today, the Countering CCP Drones Act, which Congresswoman Elise Stefanik introduced with Select Committee on the CCP Chairman Mike Gallagher, advanced through committee following a legislative hearing on the bill. The legislation would add Chinese drone company Dajang Innovations, or DJI, to the Federal Communications Commission's covered list, meaning that DJI technologies would be prohibited from operating on U.S. communications infrastructure, saying, quote, "The advancement of my legislation, the countering CCP Drones Act, is critical for American national security. Communist Chinese drones present a serious national security risk to our country, and it is time for Congress to act. Communist Chinese companies that engage in espionage activities and collect sensitive data from American citizens and entities should not be allowed to operate in the United States, and this legislation is the first step to prohibiting Chinese drone companies from freely operating on Americans' communication infrastructure." Wow, that's kind of interesting if you think about it, because that would mean literally almost every single drone you could think of that is in circulation in terms of the most popular ones, as well, I would guess, for a lot of those toy ones too, huh? I mean, most drones that I see that people use, they are made from China. And at the same time, with this, if this does happen, it makes you wonder if there will be a sudden surge of drone sales from the companies just quickly wanting to, I guess, dump the products because it's going to be, quote, illegal per se for people to actually use it. But what would people think about this? Would you agree with it for the concerns of, as they say, for example, potential data breaches and all that? Or do you think this is just fear-mongering and so forth? And in other news, I read another story, I guess, of someone who portrayed themselves a certain way on YouTube, it seems like, and it didn't end up being the case, where the person was, I guess, an abuser, which is shocking a lot of people, but apparently there was a verdict. This one says, "YouTube mom Ruby Franke apologizes at sentencing in child abuse case." That's kind of interesting too, based on what the person actually did, I guess. It says, Ruby Franke, a Utah mother of 6 who gave parenting advice to millions via a once popular YouTube channel, shared a tearful apology to her children for physically and emotionally abusing them before a judge sentenced her Tuesday to serve up to 60 years in prison. Franke told Judge John J. Walton that she would not argue for a shorter sentence before she stood to thank the local police officers, doctors, and social workers for being the, quote, angels who saved her children from her at a time when she says she was under the influence of her business partner, Jody Hildebrand, the Utah mental health counselor who had been hired to work with Franke's youngest son before going to business with Franke, also received a prison sentence Tuesday of up to 60 years, saying, quote, "I'll never stop crying for hurting your tender souls," Franke said to her children, who were not present at the sentencing hearing. "My willingness to sacrifice all for you was masterfully manipulated into something very ugly. I took from you all that was soft and safe and good." And it goes on to say, Franke and Hildebrand had each pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse for trying to convince Franke's 2 youngest children that they were evil, possessed, and needed to be punished to repent. The women were arrested at Hildebrand's house in the southern Utah city of Ivins late August after Franke's 12-year-old son escaped through a window and asked a neighbor to call the police, according to a 911 call released by the St. George Police Department. The boy was thin, covered in wounds, and had duct tape around his ankles and wrists. He told investigators that Hildebrand had put ropes on his limbs and used cayenne pepper and honey to dress his cuts, according to a search warrant. What a crazy story. This just happens so frequently, huh? There's a person like this, which is really big, seen as an angel of sort, I guess you could say, gives people advice, but they end up, I guess, being this, quote, I don't know, evil, if that's what you want to say. I'm not surprised. I mean, even with things, for example, like tech and drones, holy, you see how many fake gurus and stuff, they get away with it, and people just kind of like, okay, like they blindly do it without checking the facts and all that. I mean, it's the same thing, but yeah, will this ever end? What's the solution for this? All right, see you guys later.